Juniper by Monica Furlong, Chapter 19. I heard nothing of Gamal for many weeks, and I missed him sorely. I worried that, if Marut's schemes were defeated, loyal Gamal might be made to suffer for it in some way. I could scarcely imagine that he was happy in the house of Marut and the Grey Knight, knowing well that the best parts of his childhood had all been at moments when he was away from his mother. Now that the immediate danger to Castle Door had been averted, there seemed no real task for me there, nothing worthy of my energies or of my training as a Doran. Uni, I reckoned, might be back by now from her visit to Angharad. I decided to go and see her, to tell her of what had passed since I left her, and see whether she could give me any guidance about my future. Goodness knows she was obstinate enough in what she would and would not talk about. Yet I was certain, somehow, that if my need was urgent enough, she would relent and tell me what I had to know. I suppose I could have taken my pony and traveled faster, yet it seemed proper to approach Uni on foot, as I had done in the past. With little more than a change of clothing, I made my way to her hut, navigating by the Tor, passing through the forest without the fear I had once known. If she was not at home, I thought, I could spend a day or two at the hut and return, though I would be very disappointed not to see her. I was delighted, at the end of my long walk, to see smoke rising from her hut, just as if she were awaiting me after an afternoon of herb gathering. She was sitting in her rocking chair, and one of her strange-smelling soups was bubbling on the fire. I could tell from her smile that she was very glad to see me, though as always she did her best to hide her pleasure. "Nothing better to do, I suppose," she said with a sniff. "I was longing to see you, and I need your advice," I said. "I know," she said. "I made the soup because you were coming." "How did you know?" I asked, more for the pleasure of hearing what she would say than because I doubted her. "I dreamed it," she said airily. I had my familiar sense of being surprised by Uni, of always being on the wrong foot, yet of rather enjoying it, and I laughed to myself as I sat down by the hearth. It seemed a long time since the day I had sat there with my swollen ankle and wept at the misery of becoming her apprentice. Over supper I told her of the anti-curse and how well it had worked. She listened attentively, her dark eyes watching me, and when I was done she gave a nod of approval. "But I do not think Marut has finished with us," I added. "I believe she means to take my father's kingdom by one means or another. There is the baby, too. If my mother has a boy, then I shall not become queen." I tried to say this calmly, without feeling, but Uni was not deceived. "You're jealous," she said. For a moment I hated her. Then I nodded. "I am," I said. Uni was silent for a long time. I had forgotten how slowly life moved around her. "It is time to fly," she said at last. I knew that flying was an important adventure in the Doran world, that it was a way of discovering where one's true vocation lay. When I took a deep breath, the idea scared me, and I said, "When?" "The day after tomorrow. You will need to fast." In order to fly, you had to have a special brown ointment spread all over your skin. Then you sat very still and concentrated, usually with the help of your teacher, and if all went well, you found yourself in another place. What you had to do there was to keep your ears and eyes open. And if you did it properly, then you often learned about the future, not so much ordinary details about what might happen to you, the sort that soothsayers provide, as a sense of the shape and meaning of it. It was easy to get frightened and will oneself back into ordinary life long before the end. I was determined that no matter what I saw, I would wait for the flying dream to leave me of its own accord, rather than run away from it. The day of fasting seemed very long, but as nighttime came, Uni helped me bathe and then anointed me all over with the brown ointment, of which she kept a jar on the shelf. Then the two of us waited, standing face to face before the fire, our eyes fixed on each other. I felt a little sick, a little faint, but Uni willed me to stand upright while I waited for the moment of change. I would have given a lot to be somewhere else just then, but I tried to calm myself and wait. What changed everything was a sound like a tremendous cracking, the sort of sound a tree makes if it is snapped off in a winter gale. A noise so loud that I felt I lost consciousness for a moment. Then there was a strong pulling sensation, as if a hurricane were blowing me away and I was whirling through space so fast that it was hard to breathe. Not for long. Almost at once, it seemed, I was in a dark place that reminded me of my old dream. I could hardly see, but I was running over sharp, slippery stones, and something was coming after me, making a noise of splashing and snuffling. An appalling stench was in my nostrils, one I felt I ought to know, but I could not quite identify. Almost before the horror of this overtook me, the vision changed. Now I could see clearly, and what I saw was Gamal's face, but it was upside down. At the same time, I heard the sound of a child crying. Then once again the pulling feeling had me in its power. I was being lifted, dragged, blown off the earth, and had to submit again to being whirled in space. From high in the sky I looked down upon an island, and then I was standing on the island in front of a house. The house was white and stood upon a sort of inland cliff. I entered it, and there was a great hearth in the center of the room, the heart, I thought, of a place full of peace. Behind it were shelves with jars full of liquid, and when I looked out I could see a garden with neat rows of herbs. On the other side I could see that the land fell away, and in the distance was a view of a village and a sea and shore. Feeling almost as if I were trespassing in someone's house, and the owner might come home and catch me, I sat in a big chair by the hearth, watched thoughtfully by an owl, not Moon, who perched on a shelf. As I did so, my fears subsided. I knew that this was my chair and my house, that I fitted it perfectly and was completely comfortable, that this was the place in the world that I was seeking. It was a place in which there was no dread. From it I returned, after a while, to Uni's hut. "I found it," I reported with joy to Uni. "What?" "The place where I must be. Where is it?" I described to her the house and the island, the inland cliff and the distant sea, and she nodded. "I think I know where it is." "Where?" I was breathless. "If the flying dream wanted you to know that, it would have told you," she said maddeningly. "In any case, that is far in the future. Was that all you saw?" Much less happily, I told her of the terror that had pursued me in the tunnel, of Gamal's face, and of the sound of crying. She looked grave. "Do flying dreams make something happen to you, or are they what would have happened anyway?" I asked Uni. "There is a part of you," said Uni, "that knows the future as well as it knows the past. It is not concerned with time. So if you consult that part, which flying does, it can give you a memory of the future, just as your ordinary memory tells you about the past." She hesitated. her eyes fixed on mine as both of us struggled with this memory, a very fleeting and vague memory, in my case, of the future. I had a sense that something was being asked of me, some act of love or generosity that felt unbearably difficult. Something must be given up, I heard myself say to Uni, and she nodded encouragingly, as if that was just what she had seen herself, and she quoted under her breath a Doran poem about seeking with purity of spirit. How do you mean? I asked, but she simply stared at me in reply, as if she had said quite enough. Gamal, how does he come into it? Why is he upside down? Your love and friendship for him will be tested. Merut, or perhaps the night, they have power over Gamal at present. Uni looked past me now, as if painfully fixed on the future. And the terror in the tunnel? I finally asked. You are a Doran, Uni said. A good one. I have seen to that. To be able to encounter evil, naked evil, that is your business. Not every day, not often, but when it is necessary. And now that you have found your place, through the flying, that makes it much easier. That is your center. It waits for you, and one day it will find you. I returned to Castle Door, scarcely knowing whether to feel pleased or sad. The joy and calm I had felt in my dream house with the great hearth taught me that one day I would truly find my place and my own peace in the world. How could anyone not rejoice at that? Yet somewhere in my life, presumably before I found my way to the island, lay the prospect of terror, with the unknown significance of the crying child. I didn't like that thought at all. So not very cheerfully I set off on the long walk home. It felt comforting to see dear Castle Door looking particularly beautiful as the evening sun shone upon its steep walls and low roofs. Your father wants you, Aerith said as I was washing off the dust of my journey. Something different about the king's face struck me as soon as I came into his chamber, and without asking anything about my visit to Uni, he came straight to the point. I have heard from Merut, he said. Gamal is proposing marriage to you.